Next session. We're going to now turn things over again to Align Group with Todd Christian, Principal, Align Org, and Leah Nadai, Director, Organizational Effectiveness, Center of Excellence, SVB Financial Group. And they've got a great story to share about building internal capability for transformation. So we'll turn it right over to you.
Great, thanks. Good morning, everybody. I'm Todd Christian. So this will either be way too short or way too long. I'm not sure which. We'll figure it out as we go. Should be kind of fun, right? We've got our agenda here. So SVB, I'm going to let Leah talk a little bit about, and then I'll talk a little bit about Align Org, and we'll go storytelling from there.
Great. Very excited to be here today. SVB, we serve the innovation economy, moving bold ideas fast. And very excited to be able to share today a vignette on a piece of work that Align Org and I were able to partner on last year. And if you just take a step back and think about the context that we were in, building a center of excellence, global pandemic, a lot of work across the bank. And then while all that's happening, you have a business unit that is a $250 million business that needs support. And I'm at capacity. We're maxed out. So who do I call? Todd. I call Align Org. And we're going to share that story with you about how we partnered. And hopefully all of you can take away some key nuggets around driving op model org design work within your organizations. Back to you, Todd.
Thank you. So Align Org, we call it organization alignment, I think, more than we call it organization design, because you don't often get the opportunity to design something from scratch. You're usually starting with something that exists. Unless you start a startup, you're probably not designing from scratch. So a lot of it is just getting clear about how to get all the pieces, parts aligned together, be mutually reinforcing, right? What's the work, what are the metrics and all that. So that's the work that Align Org does. That's why we call ourselves Align Org. We've been around for, I think, almost 30 years. I think we figured out it was 28 the other day. And we have worked with a ton of organizations, and we just really enjoy this work. But the way that we do it is very much a participative design. Like, we are more process facilitators than expert facilitators. People are like, well, I want to know your industry experience. I'm like, well, we've done that in the banking industry. We've done that in whatever industry. And that's true, but a lot of it is just getting the right people in the room and getting them to move through the right decisions that they need to do. So that's a little bit about Align Org and how we do it. It's always fun to get new calls, and it was fun to get this one with Leah. So we're going to cover really briefly the background or the context of the story, like why this business unit originally called. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we partnered, how that happened, how that came together so that we looked like one team. Sometimes we talk about, like, we kind of wear your jersey, right? So when we go in, we usually don't preach like a lot of Align Org stuff. We try and be like, yeah, we're part of Leah's team. And then we're going to talk, the big thing is how inclusion helped create better outcomes for this whole thing. So how the process and how inclusion created better outcomes for the whole thing. And then we'll talk a little bit about where they ended up as a result of it, or as much as we know today.
Great. So just to tell you a little bit about the context, not going to drain this slide here, but the current foreign exchange department came to us and said, we are not scaled to bring us to the future. We're doing great. We've got great outcomes. But we're looking ahead, we're not scaled, and we need to take a look at our op model, and we need to do some redesign. And so you can see all the context surrounding that, and you can understand the objectives, part of which I think you will all appreciate, not only really focusing on the ROI, also focusing on the people outcomes, making sure that there's an inclusive approach, not just in terms of how we drive the work, but also actually looking at the people and looking at providing more opportunities for different types of people within the organization. Employee engagement was very low. It was very, very low. And so this leader said, please help me redesign and also help me with my employee experience, because this leader really cared about that. So we made it happen.
Little bit of context, like, what is this thing, foreign exchange trading? So you and Stephen will correct me if I'm wrong here, but basically if you own a tech company, you probably have some developers in India, okay, safe assumption. So you're headquartered in the West Coast and you've got some developers in India. How the heck do you pay them? And when do you pay them? And when do you put the cash over there, right? So foreign exchange trading has to like talk to the business leaders, like what is the cash flow needs for India or for London or for wherever else, and then when are we going to move the money? Because we think the money's going to go up or down based on exchange rates. So these people are like scientists. They really look at data. And there's a part of it that they call sales, which is like the talking to you and understanding what your needs are and when you need to move the money. And then there's the traders who are the ones who are like, okay, I'm going to execute the trade at this hour on this day when it hits this rate. So that's what these people do. Mm-hmm. And it's $250 million of revenue that comes into SVB for doing all those trades. Did I get that right?
Pretty good job. And needless to say, these people on this team, extremely busy, working around the clock, and at the same time needing a redesign.
So when Leah first took the call, and then she and I talked about it, we were talking to a person who was a new leader over the leader of the team that we were working on. And that person said to us, listen, this team has been doing like we hate this, doing like the secret society redesign. So like he and his couple of direct reports were sitting in like, a conference room trying to redesign the team. I guess it was probably a Teams conference room. But
I see some heads shaking because you've all experienced this.
And as a consequence of that, so they're trying to bring people along, but they're not really including them. So they've got this reputation for doing it on their own without really including people. And then they're trying to have these conference calls every week, every month with their whole team to keep them posted on the progress that they're not actually including people on. So yeah, kind of a tough situation. As a result, that was why we think their engagement scores were so low, because they had been working on this for 1 year. It's 30 people that have been working on it for 1 year and hadn't
on their
own,
no internal support, no external support. So just to recap some of the challenges for our engagement, again, they had recently hired a new FX lead. So brand new lead coming in to shake everything up. This leader really needs to get buy-in and needs to have trust and build credibility very quickly. Secondly, how do you create the case for change when the business is doing really well, right? So it's really making sure that you're focused on that forward-thinking story, and it's a risk story. Finally, having a team that's distributed globally, they're maxed to the limit. They're working around the clock. We had people in London, Asia, all over. How do we make sure that we're able to work together digitally during a global pandemic? All of that going on at once. I'm sure all of you experienced many of these things. So we really put our heads together and thought about how do we carve out time and what's the best way to work. So we looked at setting up 10 4-hour working sessions over a very tight period of time where people could be laser focused on getting together. And at the very beginning, they were a little bit skeptical, I would say. How is this work actually going to help us? But after the second workshop, they were just wowed by the focus and the output that we were able to deliver on.
Yeah, it was another one of the fun ones where, as Leah mentioned, we had somebody in Asia, we had somebody in Europe, and we had people on the East Coast and the West Coast. So Alejandro, you had to deal with this too. It was like, when are we going to meet? How about 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern time? Everybody loved that.
Yeah.
But everybody had to suck it up.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So a little bit about how we do it. The whole idea, I would say, is for us, the way that we like to facilitate is get the whole system in the room. So you might have heard somebody say that before, but get the whole system in the room. It's a microcosm of what has to happen. So when we think about how we move through our process, we usually start with like the top team. And if we need to augment them with other subject matter experts, maybe somebody upstream, maybe somebody downstream, we try and get kind of the whole system in the room. This is really different than I'm going to pick my 3 most favorite people, right, or my most knowledgeable people, because you want the people in the room who actually have the most understanding of what the trade-offs are going to be. They need to understand the choices because there are alternatives that you can pick, and everyone's got downsides. So it's really important to get the right kind of microcosm in the room so that they can design the future state in a way that helps them understand the trade-offs, and then they can mitigate the trade-offs that they've chosen. So when we do this, we typically start with that kind of, the executive team or the leadership team of whatever function it is, and then later we'll bring in, we call it micro design teams, And the micro design teams then will pick up one process or one department or whatever the major change is. You know, a lot of times when you do a redesign, there are pockets where it's like, holy crap, that's huge change. We've got to completely design a new capability, or we've got to transform some part of it. And then there's the other end where it's like the lift and shift. I hate that saying, but it is what it is, right? Where it's, hey, your work is the same, your boss is the same, you know, go about your business. And then sometimes there's the middle things like, hey, can you improve this process a little bit? It needs to be more efficient. You got that feedback? Okay, great, thanks. So there's all across the spectrum, but in those places where you've got the real transformations, the real deep change, we get in another micro design team, which again is a microcosm, right? It's a subset of whatever needs to happen, and you got some people upstream, you got some people downstream that'll understand the impacts and the trade-offs. So you get the right information in there. Then the other cool thing about doing it that way is the team that was involved become your greatest change advocates because they understand how you got there. They were involved in making the trade-offs. So like, yeah, we looked at that option, but here's what the challenge with that option was. Or, well, our strategy is this, and we thought this was a better design to implement that strategy. So you get the right information, you get people feeling like they own it and can understand it and can advocate for it.
And we had a sponsor who understood that. And the sponsor spent a lot of time having one-on-one meetings with his leadership team and also helping them identify people lower in the organization who could be part of that design team. That's one point. And then the other point I want to add to this is that this methodology was very much in alignment with our op model org design methodology that we use at Silicon Valley Bank. So we weren't bringing in a brand new methodology. It really, as Todd mentioned at the beginning, they are able to adjust and work with us in terms of our methodology because we wanted to make sure we were using the same language.
When Leigh and I originally pitched this to Tom Hamelin and Christopher Hollins at SVB, that was what we did is we took the SVB deck, like this one is the SVB deck, right? Just to make sure that it looked like, you know, we were working together. It looked like it was something that we thought about before. So here's one of the underlying principles. You know, organization design is more than getting to the answer. A lot of people could get to the answer. You could do it with a small team. You could get to the answer, and it would be the right answer. The question is, are people really going to have alignment in their thinking and their beliefs about how you got there? And are they really going to understand how to make it work? So unless you go through some, we call it use case testing, where it's like kind of run a marble through the marble works, like, okay, how would that actually work? Oh, we want to get in a new product and service. Like, who starts that? Who gets consulted? Who gets to make the decision? Then what happens? Who builds it? Who operates it? What happens with the operations team? Who expenses it? Like all that kind of stuff. And unless people understand that, it's really hard for them to advocate later and know what needs to happen in order to implement the change.
What was great about the workshops is really creating that space for alignment and really making sure that everyone understood the decision making. You know, who is weighing in, who is really approving the decisions, and then walking out the door with the decisions documented. And even if you don't agree with them, you know, you've already said your piece, but you know who the decision maker is and we're all aligned. And that's a big shift. We're a very collaborative company. Maybe a lot of your companies are as well. And so it's great to be collaborative, but at the end of the day, you need to be able to walk out with a decision and be aligned. And that was key to this org design work.
There was a woman on a team named Nish who had run a subset of the team in London. And at the end of the design, after we'd gone through a whole bunch of trade-offs and iterations, she said, this isn't my favorite design, but I can support it. And that's what you're trying to get to, right?
Yep.
So some of the from-tos on this thing, some of this may sound a little bit hard to understand, but hopefully the context I gave at the beginning is enough. But they had been focusing on their clients by geography, which we would say doesn't make a ton of sense. So they had sales managers for the East Coast and sales managers for the West Coast. And it's like, yeah, but I'm in healthcare and I'm in fintech and I'm in whatever. It didn't really match that well, but it was a product of this crazy growth that SVB has been going through. It made total sense at the time it was designed, but it didn't make sense anymore at the scale that they were at. So that they started to move to segment-specific strategies because there are different needs based on the different segments that their customers are in. They had hired this super powerful guy. I can't even remember his name. It'll come to me later.
We have a lot of super powerful guys in our company, so I'm not sure.
He knew so much about hedging risk and was really, really good, but they only brought him in kind of really selectively. like, and it almost was more like when I have a problem, right? That they would bring this guy in and he would help the customer, the client, make some decisions. And what they said was, we ought to actually move that to being like, this is one of our core capabilities. This is a part of what you get because you hire Silicon Valley Bank. They had prioritized separating sales and the execution, the trading part of it. Now, in the industry, if you go out to other banks, those are typically merged. And the reason that they're typically merged is because you want some accountability. It's like, I took your order and I executed it, rather than I put it in a queue and I don't know what happened to it. And maybe what I said didn't come true. So this team had been, again, for all good reasons, designed at a different time, with a different scale, with a different purpose kind of thing. They had split up that team. And after a lot of angst, they agreed to merge the team together, which also enabled them to recruit better, which when you're scaling is a huge, big deal, right?
Absolutely.
They had also been they called them player coaches. I think that's pretty common at SVB.
It is.
Yeah.
It's generally expected.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the leaders of the team were also selling or trading, as opposed to managing the people who are selling and trading. So imagine just the conflict that you have as a leader when it's like, hey, did you do that trade yet? Oh, Leia needs to talk to you. All right. So it was creating some challenges for them. So they moved to really just saying a leader is a leader and a trader is a trader, and someone who's on the sales floor is on the sales floor.
Which is a big shift generally for SVB in our way of thinking.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the last thing, I think I already said this before, is they had been aligned by geography, right? East Coast, West Coast, Asia, Europe. And what they did is they centralized the market trading, which really helped them because now they could trade 24/7, right? They could trade around the clock because they had people in every geography and adjacent to every trading market. What'd I miss?
You're spot on.
Okay.
Didn't miss anything. All right, so you might have noticed that we talked about managing change right up front. A lot of times what you see is when people do org design, you'll hear people talk about, well, we did the op model org design, then we did the change management. And I come from a different school of thought, and Align Org aligns with me on this, where change starts at the beginning, right? They're not two separate efforts. And so, as you heard, we were able to bring in leaders as part of our design team and going under one level as well. But when we got to this implementation phase, we did reach deeper in the organization and brought some of those managers into our purview to help manage the change. So there was a bit of a period of onboarding and communication to these managers that we brought on board. And we looked at the journey. And we thought about it as moments. Of course, it's not linear, right? But to try to provide some clarity around what that change journey would look like, we really put ourselves in the shoes of the employees, and we asked ourselves questions, and you can see them on the slide. And so then we created an implementation plan based around these moments, and there was a lot of heavy learning involved. And one of the things that really surprised me was that our sponsor demanded that his team members really lead the work streams that generally change management people lead. So generally, you've got a communication manager and a learning manager, and you've got your impact assessment person. He really wanted his leaders to lead that work and create the training materials. Could you imagine the conversation that I was having with this sponsor? Like, are you sure you really want to do that? You've got full-time traders, and then you're asking them to create materials. And he said, no, I get it, but that's what I want them to do. I want them to lead this, and I want you to help them shape it. And so I brought on a practitioner to help me. The two of us really helped providing guidance. And it was hard because we wanted to get in there and create the materials and create the job aids and create the training. He said, no, I want them to. And I think it was really smart because what he was doing was he was trying to get the knowledge out of their heads and onto paper, and then we helped shape it. So they're still doing their learning readiness training right now and job shadowing, and there's still a lot of micro design that needs to happen. But the good news is, and you'll see some of our results, there's a huge amount of excitement around this work. And then spoiler alert, I'm going to jump ahead to the end here. Our employee engagement scores went up 10%. It's very exciting to see that. What did I miss? Did I miss anything?
The only other thing that occurred to me is I like half the clients we work with don't have the ability to manage the change. And so they need help when we leave. One of the things that I think is cool about SVB is that you have that capability. And it's more than, just like, hey, can you write some stuff for me? It's the coaching and it's the structure around the change and it's providing the project management. I mean, all those things are intertwined. They don't happen without one another. And I think that's kind of cool.
All right, so what worked and what were our lessons? We sort of wove some of that in throughout this presentation, but you can have them on a page here. I will talk about a few of them. I think the one that's most important is transparency, right? So if our employee engagement scores went up, it's because we provided so much transparency around the methodology of the project, who we're going to engage when, the communication between the sponsor and the employees. I think he was in one-on-one meetings all day long, just really trying to help shepherd his team along. And one of the other things that we added in later on, you can see some sort of agile words. We weren't using agile methodology, but agile way of thinking, transparency being one of them, psychological safety being another, allowing people to be able to express their concerns and make course corrections. And then finally, we introduced the idea of retrospectives every other week for 30 minutes so that we can do continuous improvements. And in terms of the learnings, I really think it's important that you spend as much time as possible looking at not just getting the work done, but how you're going to get the work done so that you bring people along. I think this was something that we were intentional around, and we probably could have even done more of that, especially when we brought on the managers. I think we were quick to just, okay, let's get going, let's implement, right? So spending a little bit more time with them. I was in a meeting where one of the managers just sat there going, wait, what? Like, why am I here again, right? So we could do a little more work around that outreach. I'm going to focus on another one, which is just around the risk of burnout. That was a risk that I raised up front. I knew that that was something that was a risk. However, we had to do it. So would I do it again this way? Probably not as much. I would say that on the pendulum of having a team do all the change management deliverables on, pen to paper, and then on the other end of it, having a consultant do all of it for them. I think it's good more in the middle, like giving them a little bit more lift. But that's not what they wanted. So we met them where they were. And I think we can use this as a use case for the next time around, taking some of the lift off of the team so they can focus on their day job. So you can see the quote there at the bottom. This is from our sponsor, and he said that getting consensus was the biggest, most critical aspect. And I already talked about the engagement survey results going up 10%, and then we'll have another engagement survey in 6 months, and I'm hopeful that we'll see that score go up even more. What would you like to add? What were your learnings? Did you have any personal learnings?
We should tell everybody Tom's name, but I'm not going to because he might get recruited.
Right. And he was going to try to come here today, but he got tied up because he's recruiting. he's built out his team. We have job descriptions. We have, he's just doing so much, and he's traveling all around the world talking with his team members. So he couldn't be here today, but he's with us in spirit.
Yeah. Excellent. That's what we got. So we tried to reserve a little bit of time for Q&A.
Looks like we have 7 minutes for Q&A.
So again, it was either too fast or too slow. I don't know. We'll find out.
So I love the frequent retrospectives, that you all are doing. I'm curious, have you seen those continue? Becoming kind of this is what we do around here.
It's a ceremony. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. And what are some of the other maybe behaviors that you've seen change in the organization as a result of how you have been doing this?
Oh, really good question. I think the retrospectives is absolutely a ceremony that's become part of their process. We now have a business implementation manager who's driving the project plan through execution. And so she's adopting a lot of these processes. Also surveys. We're doing readiness surveys and just pulse surveys. I would say that the the two-way communication and feedback has really been something, you know, candor around feedback, because we have a leader who is willing to listen to the feedback and do something about it. So that changes behavior. Great question, thank you. Any other questions?
So my question is around when you said you all started with 10 different sessions at 4 hours, right? So what do you do? What happened when new people came in, like at session 5 and session 6? Because as you know, with all new people coming into organizations every day, did you have to begin again? Like, how do you onboard people in the middle of?
Yeah, we didn't have that issue.
Yeah,
we didn't have that issue. We had our set people that were part of those design sessions, but it was after, when we were done with the design sessions, that we were bringing on the lower levels. That, yeah, we had to spend time onboarding them and bringing them along. And we did roadshows. We put together communication decks for the whole organization to explain the business case, the why, you know, why change, what are we, you know, the whole change management stuff that you all know how to do. So yeah, it's a best practice not to bring on new people in the middle, because you do have to take time to bring them along.
They lose some continuity. You know, we say we help them build a chain of logic. And so if you have to be like, oh, here's all we did, you know, you usually run out of time. Although interestingly, Tom, the leader of this function, he actually came on after like session 3 or 4.
That's a good point.
Right, because we had like the SVP who had hired Tom and put him in over this other team, so that was interesting.
Yeah,
we did have
true.
to get him kind of folded in. That took a little bit of time.
That's a good point.
One tactical question. So what's the head count and how many locations are your people in?
For the COE?
No, the whole company.
Oh, how many people are in the whole company?
Yes.
It's
Steven
about
said
8,000 people, but plus contractors, there's 10,000. Okay. So we're global.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
It was just a tactical question.
Yeah.
My question is the change of behaviors, it's critical, definitely, and you can see that that's what's happening, and still work in progress, as you said, and you already seen it in engagement. Going forward, how are you going to maintain those behaviors aligned to rewards, recognition for those specific managers that are driving this change? Have you thought about that? It's already part of the plan. Maybe it's going forward. But have you thought about it?
Yes, absolutely. The STAR model. You know, I dream STAR model, right? Like every night. So we've thought about it, and in terms of the holding people accountable, there's a competency system that's being implemented, and that should help with the clarity around role and job description. So that's one piece. That will also help with the how are we incentivizing or role modeling behavior, because they'll know what their role is all about. In terms of we're also looking at pay, and there's a whole HR track. They're looking at pay. They're trying to make sure that our market reference points are up to par. In terms of process, if we're going around the STAR, a lot of processes are being documented as part of this job readiness training and shadowing. So that's one piece. In terms of technology, as an output of this work, there are a lot of new technology opportunities, and there's a track focused on technology. They're looking at new computers and software and telephone technology to help them be more efficient in their trading capacity. What piece of the STAR did I miss? I think I went around.
The other part I was thinking about was Tom. His leadership, Alejandro, is like huge, because he had a different set of expectations, and he knew that they were looking for different results. So he has definitely got his hand on the rudder for that thing.
Yeah, and right now we are full throttle in this implementation mode. And if a few months down the line, I'm going to sit back down with Tom and say, okay, what did we learn? How can I help? Let's look at some of your metrics. Are you getting the output that you're looking for?
I think we got time for one more.
One question.
We might even be on time. We'll find
Yeah,
out.
well done.
How do you manage between like a manual process as you're waiting for the technology change, and what is the kind of that determining factor as to, do I wait, or do I just implement the manual change, or do I wait for the technology change?
The SVB answer is just do it. Like, get it done, figure it out. Don't wait for the technology, come up with some process. Now, is that the right thing to do? Maybe not. That's what we do out of survival. My professional answer is document the process, and then bring in a design team and think about how could this process be optimized, and then what's the technology to support it.
Yeah, use the experts. Closest to the work.
Right. Great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to